Hi, welcome to this week's nutrition session. I'm Sarah, the nutritionist here at Waterfront Neighborhood Center. This video is a reposting of a session that I hosted with our community members from Waterfront and specifically our seniors program. If you would like to join a session like this in the future, you can email June. Her email address will be at the end of this video and in the description. And if you also have any future topics that you'd like me to address or for us to talk about, then you can also email June with those as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy. Okay, so in terms of exercise and nutrition, it's important to think about them together because a lot of it is about energy. And when we're thinking about exercise, it really can be anything. So any physical activity. So things like walking, running, doing yoga, any other kind of Pilates, that kind of thing, even just stretching. I know when the center was open, we had the classes to do, I think, Zumba as well. Like all of that counts when I'm talking about exercise. It's not just like going to the gym and lifting weights, that kind of thing. So the recommendation from WHO and from Health Canada is to do 150 minutes of exercise every week. So that's kind of a weird number because, of course, minutes, you don't really think about them in like hundreds, but you can break it down into being 2.5 hours a week. And it's best if we're doing that in at least 3 days. So you don't want to like do it 2 hours on one day and then do nothing, like only a half hour another and nothing the rest of the week. It's best if we can spread it out. So we want to make sure that when we're doing that kind of exercise, and that can be things like walking or jogging, those sorts of things, that we are going for a long amount of time, but also throughout the week. I'll also note that it's recommended to, especially if you have some issues with maybe mobility or energy, to just do it in 10-minute bouts. So you can walk for 10 minutes and take a break. Obviously, just listening to your body, but that's kind of, that still will give you the health benefits. Even if you're taking lots of breaks, it doesn't really matter. It all adds up. And I should also note that this includes like dancing and even gardening. I know a lot of people right now are getting into gardening as we are in beautiful, beautiful weather. I'm outside right now, but that's something that a lot of people are doing too, and that counts as exercise. And some of the benefits are, of course, getting active and feeling good about moving around, but especially improving balance and preventing falls as we get older. All of that is really important too. So when I'm talking about nutrition and exercise, there's kind of two phases. And if you saw the handout already, then you'll kind of know where I'm going with this. But we want to think about what we're eating before we go out and what we're eating after. So a lot of this research comes from sports nutrition. So it's like athletes and people playing a rigorous sport for an hour or more. So that is a bit different than going for a walk, of course, but we can take the same ideas and just scale them down a little bit. So we know that we want to be eating a meal before we go out to exercise within 4 hours. That's kind of as long back before you want to think about eating again if you're going to go out or stay in if you're going to be exercising. And then if you get closer to that 1 hour mark, then it's good to have a snack. That's kind of the before phase. And I know we had a question specifically about this. If you're exercising early in the morning, like 8 a.m., that what do you do then? So the recommendation still is to eat that hour, within the hour or around that point. But if you're going to have a snack, having it up to that half hour is still okay. A half hour before you go out. Um, but it's tricky because the energy that you're getting from that food will help keep your blood sugar up while you're out, which is important for your health in general. But also it's important for performance. So you will feel like you have a bit more energy as well as you're out if you've eaten something before you go out. So, uh, but if we get into that range of you ate maybe 15 minutes before, then you go out for a run. A lot of people experience some discomfort as well because your body is still digesting. You don't really have the energy yet, but you have whatever you just ate is kind of moving around, and that's not very fun. So that's why the recommendation is to have it a little bit earlier. But it's all with that, it really is about how you feel. And if you don't have any discomfort, that sort of thing, then you can go closer to that half hour. Um, yeah. So the next question is, what are you eating at that time? So if we're talking about the meal that you're having, ideally 2 to 3 hours before you go out, we just want to make sure that we have something with carbohydrates in it and protein. So this is a pretty common theme when we're talking about exercise. But as I talked about with a bit of that discomfort, we don't want to have much fiber before we go out because that takes a lot longer to digest and it's a little bit more of an intense process. You don't want your body to be doing that while you're really moving around a lot. It just doesn't feel good. So then you may not be getting the energy quick enough. If you've had that only maybe an hour before, it may not quite have gotten to you yet. So some of the recommendations, I have a little list on the handout that you guys have, and I can see if I can share it here too, just so we can see it. Okay, so this is the before that we're still talking about. So the examples that I had for the meal on here are the like a turkey sandwich with a side of fruit because the fruit is going to give us that really quick, a bit of sugar, little bit of that carbohydrate to fuel us through our exercise, and that's the same idea through all of those examples. Obviously, you don't have to have that specific food, but all of those are based around having protein and more carbohydrate. And that's, um, we have some examples too on the other side. If it's around that hour point, we got things like cheese and crackers, a quarter cup of nuts, and the energy bites that we're going to be talking about today. Those sorts of things you can have around an hour before, and you'll have lots of energy, and you won't feel like you're really digesting it. And some of these things are really easy to grab too, which is nice. So it's not too much work. So then I want to, now we're going to go to after. So now we've come back inside after our walk. We did it in the evening when it's not so hot. And even though we ate something just before we went out, we want to have some more, something else to eat. So 1 hour after, within the hour. Some folks say 30 minutes after. Right, I had the snack is a half hour after, so something just quick to have right after are things like smoothies, and you can make that with cow's milk, dairy milk, or soy milk. Even just grabbing like a fruit, like some grapes or an apple, and having it with a bit of yogurt and or a banana with a glass of milk. The ratio they say is 3 to 1, so it is very similar to what you're going to be eating before. So 3 parts carbohydrate to 1 part protein. And it doesn't have to be exact by any means, but that's kind of the idea. And here it's a little bit more fiber as well. Um, yeah, and then you're going to want to have a meal an hour or two after as well. So this is where we're thinking a little bit more about protein as well. So often we'll hear about exercise and you'll just hear about protein. Like that's what a lot of people really talk about. And this is the part where you need to have a little bit more protein in this meal to make sure that you are maximizing all the exercise that you just did. So this helps to make sure that your muscles are getting all of the protein building blocks they need to keep strong after that exercise. Yeah, so then the other thing that I really wanted to talk about as well, of course, is hydration. So we want to make sure that we're drinking enough water, as June already mentioned, with the heat. That's really important. We want to make sure we're having at least 2 glasses, like 2 cups of water that's equals out to 500 milliliters or half a liter before we're going out. Assuming that, of course, you aren't waking up and going right out because that's a little bit different, but making sure we're having some water before we go. And then if you're going for a longer period of time, making sure you're drinking throughout. And of course, drinking after as well. Water is really important. And especially in this heat, it's extra important because we lose water so much more quickly. And I have a note as well here that in terms of sports drinks, so if we're talking about things like Gatorade, Powerade, that sort of thing, they're only needed if you're doing more intense physical activity for at least 45 minutes. So that's a good rule of thumb. If you think that you might need one, in that case, then they're pretty much all the same at a certain point. So having one can be helpful if you're for people who are playing sports and that kind of thing, or if you're really sweating. That's kind of all the information there. So I'm going to show you guys the recipe. So I'm hoping that you saw the recipe already. But if not, I actually have a paper copy with me, and you have it from your email. Actually, it's backwards, so you can't read it, so never mind. But you have the full thing here, and yeah, let me see. I have all of my ingredients ready to show you guys how to make this, and I have some waiting in the fridge too. So let's see. Let me try and do that. So I have all of my ingredients here. So starting from the top of the recipe, we have the coconut, the oats, peanut butter, flaxseed, cranberry. The grocery store didn't have any sunflower seeds, so instead I have walnuts, and then honey and vanilla extract. So I'm gonna combine everything here. You can see this okay. So the important thing about, I'm going to talk about each ingredient just as I add it quickly, but we have 2/3 of a cup of shredded coconut. So I toasted a bit of this just in a frying pan. I put it on about 3 and just watched it carefully, and it browned up quite nice, which is important for flavor, but in terms of nutrition, not really much different. I just think it's delicious. So coconut, and then the oats. These are large flake oats. You can use any traditional oats, though. I wouldn't recommend instant necessarily, but for example, steel cut oats, they'll be a little bit of a different texture, so I probably wouldn't recommend them in this. So they go in. We have the peanut butter. So this is crunchy peanut butter, but you can use smooth, it doesn't really matter. But as long as it's a natural peanut butter, there, which means that the only ingredient is peanuts. So we don't want any added sugar or any added other oils, just something really simple. You can also get it at a bulk food store where they like, grind it there. The same, great. And then next is our flaxseed. So this I ground myself just because I happen to have the whole seeds in the cupboard. The once it's ground, it doesn't really last long out of the cupboard. So it's good to keep it in the freezer if you have ground, or to keep it as whole and then grind it whenever you need it. If you have a food processor or a mortar and pestle, that sort of thing. So I'm going to add that in there. And then, so we have the dried cranberries, and this you can exchange out for raisins or sour cherries, anything like that. This is really a recipe you can customize to whatever you like. So I personally like cranberries a lot. And then the next is the sunflower seeds, which I replaced with walnuts, which are really high in our omega-3s, which is something that I've talked about before as well. They're really good for our heart and as well for their anti-inflammatory. So that's important for our immune system. I mentioned them a little bit last week too. So the nuts in there, and then we have the honey, which is really important in a recipe like this because it really sticks everything together. It's the glue. There are some similar recipes where they use dates, which you can also definitely do. It's a great option, but you do need a food processor if you're making it with dates, which I don't happen to have. Um, but they aren't too expensive. I just don't happen to have one here. Um, and then last but not least, where it is, we have the vanilla. So this is just your standard baking. It's just for really for the aroma, and that's about it. And this is it says on the recipe 3/4 of a teaspoon, but I put in a whole teaspoon. Doesn't really matter very much. So the really beautiful thing about this recipe is that you don't need to turn the oven on, and you don't really need to do very much except measure out your ingredients and mix them all together. If you want to toast the coconut, that is another step, but you don't have to do that either. And if you don't like coconut, you also don't have to include it. I would just put a little bit more oats in if you're not putting in the coconut. Put this up here. So I'm just going to mix this all together, and you can see it comes together pretty quickly. If it's looking like really crumbly or anything, then you can add a little bit more water. But at this point, you just put it into the fridge and let it sit for about a half an hour to kind of set together. And also, if you have a peanut allergy or someone in your family has a peanut allergy, um, you can use sunflower seed butter or like another one like that that doesn't have any actual peanuts in it. I know there is like a product that's specifically like peanut butter but not peanut butter. I forget what it's called right now. Or you could choose a recipe that's made with dates, and then you don't need the peanut butter anyway. So this is already sticking together pretty well. So that can go into the fridge, but I'm just going to grab the ones I made earlier. So these have just been in the fridge for about 45 minutes now. but you can see it's the exact same recipe and they actually stick together quite well. And they're not sticky on the outside once they've been in the fridge. So you don't have to worry about it getting all over your hands or anything like that.
Did you put the mix in the bowl in the fridge first, or just did you make them into balls and then just put the balls in the fridge?
The first time I did the balls into the fridge because I did a really bad job of reading my own recipe. But it does work either way. It's just
you can still make the balls you can still make the balls once it's been refrigerated.
Yeah. So and this will make about 20. So I actually have the rest of the dough or the rest of the mix in the fridge. So I'll try that as well because this is 15 here. So there's about enough for 5 more in the fridge. And after you make them, you can store them. It's recommended up to like about 5 days in the fridge. So if you're making a full batch of these, you're making 20, then it might be better to freeze them if you live alone or if someone else in your family isn't going to help you eat them, because that is kind of a lot. Or you can always do a half batch as well. And just make sure it's in an airtight container, whether that's a Ziploc or a Tupperware, that sort of thing, or non-branded versions. Yeah, and of course, I have some substitutions on the handout too, making sure if you need it to be gluten-free, you can use gluten-free oats. If you want it to be vegan, you can use maple syrup, although it won't stick together quite as well, but it should still work if you add a little more peanut butter. Yeah. So this recipe is great really for either before or after exercise. It's more designed for that before period, but honestly it works for either side. So you're getting a bunch of protein from the peanut butter, the nuts, and even a little bit from the oats, and then the lots of carbohydrates as well from the oats, from the honey, and from the fruit that you add. So it's really good for before or after exercise. And it's honestly delicious. And when they're cold, it's like a cold treat on a hot day. So it's a bonus. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop.
Can you eat?
Sorry? I would recommend just 1 or 2 at a time. They're pretty big.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I wouldn't, they have enough honey in them that they're a little bit like a cookie. So I wouldn't, have a lot of them. But that's a good question.
Yeah.